And we're here to talk about the role of business in community and economic development. We have a little bit about us. My name is Catherine Correll, and I have been with Downtown Colorado Inc. for a very long time. I won't get into that. And I also have Kylie Brown from our team. And so we're going to kind of tag team it a little bit. I will be mainly presenting, but if she has any key examples or if I mess anything up, she's here for me. And so our organization has been working in the state of Colorado for just over 40 years, and we were created to help communities understand the tools that support downtown areas and the businesses within them. We also work outside of downtowns with commercial districts, town centers, and so communities that are trying to create thriving commercial areas. We work with all of them. So we do truly work across the state of Colorado, and we have kind of a heavy concentration in areas that have organizations such as business improvement districts, downtown development authorities, and urban renewal authorities. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But so you know, business improvement districts tend to be a little bit more centered in the metro area on the Front Range, whereas the other tools are a little bit more used in more rural or places that are a little further out around the state. And we love what we do. We have a lot of fun. It's placemaking. So we look at a geographical area and look at how to create thriving activities in that area. And so it really crosses over with small business a lot and thinking about how do you make a home that is conducive to a successful business. And with that, we'll just jump right in. So the goals for today are going to be around understanding what an entrepreneurship ecosystem looks like and really thinking of that as an ecosystem, right? So your business is one entity in a community, and how do you create thriving partnership and collaboration with all of the different entities within the community? Considering the organizations that represent and advocate for businesses, adding a high value to the benefit that businesses get, and additional ideas for business involvement. So those are some of the things we're looking to cover today. This is a little bit about why we do what we do. And this is a quote from Peter Kageyama, who wrote For the Love of Cities. And the idea that people are looking for a place not only to live, but a place to love is important, right? So many of our community and economic development partners focus on filling potholes or bringing jobs, employers to the community. But what we're finding is that you can't attract businesses, you can't attract employers, you can't even attract residents if you don't have a number of different things. So people are really looking for a combination of opportunities to lead and to grow. People are looking for culture and aesthetics. They're looking for beauty. They're looking for quality of life, in short. And so when we think about a place to love, a big part of that is the businesses within the community and the value that they add. And so we'll jump a little bit deeper into that idea as we go on. So I wanted to start with a question for all of you, just thinking about how you support your community and how does your community support you? And I would welcome you all. We have a very small group, so it's perfectly good to unmute and share, but you can also put stuff in the chat if you'd prefer. And it's okay if nobody has anything to add. We were talking a little bit about this, and
I can chime in on this. My name is Jessie. I run a company called Outgrow Your Garage, and we focus really hard on helping small businesses get their operations in order so they can get through that early growth stage. And those businesses are ultimately the ones that become vital community resources. During the pandemic, they were our essential businesses, but even after that, those small businesses are what goes on your downtown Main Street, but they're also the service businesses that support them. They're your plumbers and your carpenters and your people who patch the potholes and all of those different pieces. So working with that is a really fun adventure. I'm out in Delta, Colorado, and we do an employee training program through the city that is super fun and brings in a lot of connection between our different businesses, and having that community is giving us a more thriving business ecosystem in a town that doesn't have a lot of business in it.
Yeah, absolutely, Jesse. I love your business concept and I love what you do. And I'm going to write your name down because you're making a very valuable, I think most businesses make a huge valuable contribution to the community, but helping to get folks out of their home and into the main street, or at least involved with the community, is a big part of what we do. So I'd love to touch base with you and work with you. I also know that Delta they recently formed an urban renewal authority. And so we've been kind of tracking their work there, looking to attract a hotel, I believe. And then you're just really thinking about how your community supports you. So these are two questions. And oftentimes you'll hear from businesses that they do a lot in the community in terms of donations, right? Especially retailers. Or, a lot of times businesses feel like they're constantly being asked to donate products and donate services. And can you do it all for free? And I think as small businesses, that can often be a little bit of a drain, but it's the only way that some businesses know how to contribute to their community. The other question is, how does your community support you? And we have a couple in the chat. Let's see. Oh, sweet. Thank you, Jesse. Business is all about the interconnectedness of economy and people. How can we add value to each other? I love it. Jervis, this is beautiful. This is beautiful. And I feel like we'll be speaking the same language as we go on. All right. So we're going to have a few of these slides throughout because we definitely want to hear from you all and have this be a discussion. We have a lot of information in here. I'm going to go through it fast to try and do the 50-minute deadline for Stacy, but we will keep moving. So I'm going to scoot through this entrepreneurial ecosystem. And Jervis, it sounds like you'll be very familiar with this idea, but this is adapted from the National Trust Main Street ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem that they have developed. And we sort of reshaped it to look at engagement and environment. And so thinking about these different criteria as sort of buckets that you can put your activities in, and you can also use it as sort of a way to measure what is happening or not happening in your community, right? And so thinking about education and training as, ways to build awareness, to share, different information that's happening in the community, to provide places for people to learn together. Human capital is the idea of building the individual's capital. So it could be professional development, workforce training, helping people further their own individual goals. Social capital looks at building those social networks and the ways that people interact together within your community. And those three criteria we look under shaping engagement and how, as a community, you can work with folks at the level that they're on and share information and learn information from them simultaneously. So you're really building that ecosystem in terms of the engagement side. And then we have shaping the environment. And the shaping the environment, I'm going to start on the right with the financial capital and thinking about the goals within a community and how do you make financial capital available for people to invest in themselves, in their business, in the community. You'll see this a lot, especially during the pandemic. You saw a lot of grants come out that were supporting people expanding into outdoor patios, right? So they made money available to businesses to do things that needed to happen for the community to continue to thrive, right? And similarly, you can use that same example with regulation. So a lot of communities are, short on housing, or they would like to have more public activities or front-facing things that people can do in their main street, on their district. And so it kind of goes to business and looking at, what are the regulations like? Are you limiting how people can invest? Do you have a lot of limitations that are making your, forcing your businesses to struggle versus allowing them to thrive and solve problems that you have as a community. And then there's culture. And culture means a lot of things. It can mean those activities and those events and, having things where you actually feel like you're participating in culture, having public art or those types of things. But it can also be the culture behind your community and really thinking about, are you a community of yes, or are you a culture of no, right? So when people come with an idea, is your community basically going to say, I don't think so, not here, not today? Or are they going to say, let's explore that and let's see what that looks like? And really setting that culture is a big part of a thriving downtown and a thriving commercial district. And so we look at the ecosystem and all of these things kind of playing into one another. And so as we work with communities and these entities that are looking to support businesses, we think about, which of these buckets is full, which of these buckets is empty, how does one lead into the other? And so we'll talk a little bit about some of the tools that we use to help build these different buckets. And then we can also talk about sort of some of the things that we're looking at that businesses can do or can expect from their community, or can ask of their community, and looking at that interplay of the relationship that Jervis was talking about. So first and foremost, in your communities, what kind of organizations do you have that support businesses? And I will scoot on to the slide with the answer too. So yes, GBC is an amazing resource. Unfortunately, there's only one in the whole state. So it is definitely a statewide resource, and they are amazing. And this is looking a little bit more at local resources that businesses use. And so what we usually hear the most of is chambers, merchants associations, and economic development corporations, which exist throughout the state. Almost every county or region has them. There are varying levels of activity from them. Oh, Laura, I love you. Libraries are some of my favorite resources, and they're sort of under not represented on our chart, and that's a bummer. But libraries are a huge resource for businesses, and we're going to add them into our slide here. But we have this chart to sort of look at the different areas that they work. And most of the time when we're talking with businesses, we hear, with chambers, they do things like ribbon cuttings, happy hours, or networking events. And they represent businesses who are their members, right? It's an older model, and it doesn't always represent the robust community that may exist because it requires membership. And so we look at different ways to add to that representation and that advocacy, and broadening it so that you're not just looking at chambers, you're not just looking at merchants associations, but that you do get into public entities like libraries. And I think libraries have taken on a role and have been filling in terms of shared services, resources, guiding support, because things like the small business development centers are also not in every community, right? Like theoretically, they are represented around the state, but it's usually one staff person, and they have a long way to travel to get all across our glorious, beautiful, large, very large state. And so thinking about how you fill that, libraries are stepping up, and a lot of businesses are stepping up. So we're seeing things like co-working spaces being created, or other things that might be private, they might be nonprofit, and some of them are public, like libraries. But a lot of these resources are bubbling up to fill gaps that we see in communities. And sometimes municipalities are even stepping in. But looking at how these different entities play with each other, making sure that at the end of the day, all of those buckets that we talked about in the beginning with the ecosystem are getting filled, right? And so just considering the different partners, considering the different buckets, and kind of understanding where they're being filled or not filled is a good exercise to have in any community. And we often do that. Some of what we focus on is the creation of districts that specifically focus on businesses. And the beauty of this type of district is that they are typically financed with either tax increment financing or a mill levy. And so it's something where people basically, with a mill levy, a business improvement district or a DDA, the property owners and the businesses in an area essentially agree to put a small tax on themselves. And so everybody in the area contributes evenly to an organization that then represents all. There's no membership and there's no way for people to sort of ride on the coattails because everybody's contributing through that process. As I mentioned, business improvement districts tend to be more accessible in the metro area and the Front Range. And I think that's often because the business community feels healthier, right? So they will vote to tax themselves. Whereas in smaller rural communities, that's less likely. But yeah, so these are different types of organizations that we work with, and they can all provide different services that fit within that ecosystem, right? So on the far right side, it is a very publicly run entity, the Urban Renewal Authority, and those do not have any contribution from businesses. Those come from tax increment financing that is generally based on property tax, and they will often provide grants for physical improvements to spaces. The purpose of the organization is to remove blight, but you can then use that to, add to your building, if you need to meet ADA accessibility requirements, or you need to do sprinkling, or you need to, make some sort of major renovation that's going to remain with that building regardless of what business is in there. You can often use those types of funds in that way. Whereas the Downtown Development Authority is a little mix of both. They can do those big physical building projects. They can also do marketing, events, branding, fun things that kind of create that culture and the brand of a community, as well as the businesses within it. And then the business improvement districts don't usually do as much large physical improvements, although some do, as they do the marketing and the branding, the whole idea of clean and safe and making sure that you hit those bare minimums in terms of your community, because no business is going to thrive if people are afraid to come visit it, unless it's based out of your home. Well, still, you wouldn't want people to be afraid. So, all right. So moving on, we have a little bit. So typically the type of organization and the type of support that you have in a community is based on the life cycle of where you are in your community, right? And obviously, like many of our communities were thriving at one point in time, and then they have shrunken or, had some sort of large change, and, you might end up stagnant. And so we look at stagnant, growing, and mature as the life cycle, with stagnant being high vacancies with underutilized properties, and it might have issues with things like, is it clean and safe? Growing is sort of up and coming, and you see change coming in, some close, some closures, some openings of businesses, and different types of investment coming in. And then you might have mature, where you have a very strong mix of retail, restaurants, jobs. People are using the community, and we refer to these more as almost like I wouldn't say 24-hour, but maybe like an 18-hour community, right? Because people are there in the morning, they're there at lunchtime, they're there in the evening. And that's kind of what you want for businesses, because you have that steady traffic flow. And so then you think about what are the types of organizations and the benefits that you need at each different stage of life cycle. And so that's kind of our system for looking at it. And our next slide is just kind of a simple overview of kind of what the priorities might be depending on where you are as a community in a district. And as businesses, this is important to think about, right? because the different communities are going to put different resources towards engaging with you and supporting you, right? Obviously, a mature commercial district is going to have more resources because most of our communities in Colorado are primarily funded by sales tax. Okay. So if you have that thriving commercial district, you're probably going to have more resources to invest in it. If you're on the stagnant side, you also need to be thinking about how to invest in those businesses, but it might be more around the attraction side. Now, typically, the way economic development has encouraged our communities to work is that if you are on the stagnant side, they ask you to, they'll tell you to focus on primary jobs, which in the state of Colorado is kind of silly because that often means employers of 500 or more. Right? When the backbone of our community is actually small business. So I think that we've seen a big turnaround in the way the strategy works for stagnant communities, that they're really now starting to support the small businesses and understanding that one of the bigger challenges that small businesses are having is around workforce and actually getting the employees to staff the business. Okay, so are you all members of organizations in your community? And what do you like that they do for you? And you can totally unmute.
Yeah, we are obviously members of GBC. We're members of Colorado Inclusive Economy. We're members of an informal group of nonprofits and for-profits trying to help people get from poverty to self-sufficiency. I'm forgetting some. My co-founder is a member of a group called Wise Women, Colorado Thought Leaders Forum. So yes, we're members of lots of organizations, and they help us in lots of ways. One of the biggest ones for us, being so mission driven, is we aren't going to be able to achieve our mission or vision on our own. So having partners in that is a really big deal. How do we expand access to opportunity for more people is sort of our fundamental mission. Business development, obviously networking, meeting like-minded people that share values, also sort of the fundamental aspects of owning and operating a business. So business strategy.
Absolutely. And so are you looking at the state of Colorado as your primary market?
For now, I mean, it's our primary market. We've got prospects and clients outside of Colorado, but the short answer is it's our primary market for now.
Very cool. Yeah, I see Laura. Laura, what community are you in?
I'm just based in Denver, and my organization is fairly new. I've been a freelancer for years and years and have just decided to grow beyond me and my skills. And I'm still working on that growth strategy. But being part of an organization, joining communities is important to me on an individual level. So I'm just looking around and feeling things out and seeing what types of organizations feel right for our mission and vision.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. In Denver, there are maybe 16 business improvement districts. So they are all over the city. The biggest one that people are usually aware of is Cherry Creek North. Right. So when the mall came about, they created a business district in Cherry Creek North to support all of the small businesses that aren't in the mall. But there's also a downtown business improvement district, 4 of them along Colfax. There's one on Santa Fe. One started recently on Federal Boulevard. There's one at 5 Points. So there's a lot of these types of organizations that you might be able to reach out to in your community if you haven't already touched base.
Thank you.
All right. I see Golden. Oh, Stacy. Yeah.
Yep. I've only lived here for 2 years. So being an independent business person, more in the professional services realm, my clients are nationwide. It's more of an opportunity for me to connect with other business women on a personal level than a client development level. But it's been a really great resource for me.
Absolutely. And, Golden also has a downtown development authority. They do a lot with business support as well. And they're very active. We work quite a bit with Golden too. And One Delta County is is great. And Delta, Delta, I think because they have the smaller community, they also have a chamber. I don't know how active they are right now, but
I'm actually not even sure it's really happening.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, some of those, it's interesting because in some instances, and we'll talk a little bit more about ways that you can kind of help shape those things, but in many instances, chambers their model has gotten outdated. And so in some communities, they haven't really refreshed in a while. And so it might make sense to actually get involved to reshape them. Right? Especially given the nature of your business. It could be a kind of cool opportunity in a different way. Great. Well, thank you all for chiming in. Appreciate it. And I have some cute slides that I'll highlight. We have the benefits for business that we see from a lot of the organizations that we work with. And these might be things certainly these are good with restaurant, with retail. If you're a service business, there are different types of support. And I think some of these benefits will help you as well. But thinking about collaborative marketing, and I brought in the different components from the ecosystem into this slide, but thinking about collaborative marketing, some of my favorite examples in this area are Durango, which actually has a business improvement district, even though it is not in the Front Range. They don't do their own marketing or their own events, but what they do is they say, hey, businesses, anything that you're doing, we're going to put in a package and we're going to sell it together. So they will tell everybody in town all the things that the different businesses are doing, and they will market their events for them. And if they look at one event and they see a hole in that event, they will call out to other businesses and say, hey, does anybody want to fill in this thing? Right? So it creates that collaboration. And so I'm plugging this with supporting the social capital in the ecosystem because it's building the network between the businesses. So they're supporting one another. It's also building human capital because it's allowing the different businesses or the different individuals to grow and identify ways that they can grow. And it's supporting culture because it's really representing the overarching activities that are happening within the community and ways that you can be involved. So it really helps people who are in the community understand how they can get tapped in, but it also looks at, how people are partnering together, right? That idea of collaboration is really important for culture. Do you guys have any examples of collaborative marketing ideas that you've seen?
The Center for Community Wealth Building is doing some really cool work around getting similar types of businesses together and doing collaborative marketing things, and then also group subscriptions so that you can actually afford higher priced, better software to help with your marketing needs and help with your other business needs. And so, they're doing awesome work.
They really are. And I think Paul Bindle is presenting at 1:00 from there. And we love Paul. I'm actually meeting with somebody that they referred me to later today. They're a great resource. I have tried several times to get them to work more in rural Colorado, but they're pretty Denver diehard. But what a cool resource. And I go to them regularly to see what they have going on. But as you're talking about thinking about those procurement services, our next slide touches on shared services and the idea that you can also use a district or, an informal group. It can also put together shared services. And so we talked a little bit about co-working. We're seeing a lot of co-working come about, especially in our rural areas where they might not have as much access, right? So in larger communities, you could do this at Union Station. You could do it at the library. In some of the smaller communities, they may or may not have access to all of those services. And so the idea of putting together shared services that could be spaces, it could be commercial kitchens. We're seeing tool libraries. And those are really everywhere. Like there's some right on Santa Fe and Denver, as well as throughout the state. But even in agricultural communities, you'll see agricultural businesses getting together and creating a library. So not everybody has to buy all of the expensive production equipment that they need to grow and produce food. And that also presents opportunities for human capital because it allows the individuals to come in and grow professionally. It establishes a different type of culture in the community where there is sort of this can-do spirit, and people get to connect with each other and interface because of the shared services and those opportunities, which also creates stronger social capital through networking. Other ideas here. I know Jesse's shared some from community wealth building. Other thoughts or things that you all have seen or would like to see?
I'd like to see more designations and transparency in how businesses are impacting their people, their communities, their environment. I think there's a lot of opportunity for either public reporting requirements or business entities and associations like GBC to get together and say, hey, we're going to share what we do. We're going to create groups and designations that people can, put a little badge on their email signature, and start to create awareness around how businesses are treating their communities, treating their people, treating their customers. That's something I'd like to see more of, so that a customer or a prospective employee or a prospective investor can quickly look at a business and sort of understand its values and the outcomes it is and isn't achieving for all those different stakeholders.
Yeah, I love that. And, that could be something where you could create a series of badges across the state, and then people could start to adopt them. Because I see many businesses that are maybe doing that by printing it on their materials or their menu, or when you do your checkout, if it's an in-person business, you'll see people starting to brand on their website around those things, but there's nothing where it's sort of like across the board. And we started to see that come about in business improvement districts during the pandemic. They developed a series of icons where it was like touchless payment or personal space markings, or I forget what the wording was, but they did start developing these little icons that businesses within their district could use, and they would put them on their listings for the whole community. But that would be something to aspire to within a community and or our state. Yeah, that's a great idea. And feel free, anytime you have any ideas, we just wanted to sort of foster a conversation. So another area that we see a lot of room to support businesses is around the built environment. And one of the trends that we're seeing is a conversion of actual built space. So many places, especially our larger cities, are seeing a glut of office that businesses are not really using anymore, and thinking about how to convert that office space. But in terms of more of the commercial district type of business, we are seeing that, especially in historic areas, the spaces are too large, right? Like businesses may or may not be able to afford a large retail space in a historic downtown. And Jesse, this is kind of important if you think about your business, right? Because what you could do is look at how to have two businesses come together. If one was doing manufacturing and they might want to be at the back of the house, and one was doing, sales and they want to be at the front of the house, we call that mullet retail, with the business in the back and the party, or the business in the front, the party in the back. And, but thinking about how you reshape the built environment to be more conducive to businesses. And in terms of ecosystem, we typically would look at this as you would need to have education and training to kind of help think that through. It would reshape the culture within the community because it does foster that sort of can-do and the idea of how you structure the different pieces. And it might require some support around financial capital. And I probably should have regulation on here too, because you need to make sure that your community allows you to do that. But we're seeing a lot of movement in those areas to take on the built environment. Are there other ideas along this lines? I know we saw with the pandemic, it was kind of an amazing time in our field, right? Because we got to see people all of a sudden get approved to share, parking lots or take over alleys. So private and public in the built environment, the questions of public and private became very intertwined, right? It all became about quality of life and the public good rather than who owns the space. And so I think that now that those lines have been moved a little bit, the conversation is a little bit more open than it used to be. Anyone have any thoughts here?
Travis had a comment about how can we integrate the services that people need in order to work in the built environment, like childcare, primary care, meeting spaces.
Absolutely. And I think we'll get a little bit into that with our next slide. Oh, I love it, Jesse. We got to hang out. So when we think about what people need and those the idea of childcare or the different items that Jervis mentioned, I think it does get into the idea of advocacy and having an entity that will advocate for you as a business. Now, Good Business Colorado is great at the state level, but also thinking like how you can advocate for yourself in a local government is key, because a lot of times that's what impacts those questions. Certainly, there could be funding from the federal or the state level to support, but at the local level where you're actually located and kind of thinking through those things, it comes down to advocacy and having somebody who's going to really go to bat for you to support you as a business. And we've seen this in a number of different ways, right? So, great example here in Denver, and it actually came from Denver Housing Authority. So they built the Mariposa housing over here off of Santa Fe and 10th, 9th. And they did a great job. I'm a big fan of their work there, because normally when you redo housing projects, you only keep about 15% of the people. They were able to keep over 50% of the people in that area because they did a nice job with phasing and kind of how they developed things. But what they found was the people in that community really wanted to have a grocery store that was closer because most of them don't have vehicles. And the business owners and the people there really needed childcare. And they went out, and because they had a group that they were supporting, they had the power to really reshape what those questions look like. And they were actually able to bring in a childcare provider into the community. And they were actually able to attract a small mom and pop type grocer to the area so that people could get food without having a vehicle. And so I think there are entities that can do that and really build it into the plan for the built environment. Denver Housing Authority primarily focuses on development, right? Like housing development and management of supply of housing. And yet, because there was this need designated by their constituencies, they were able to really go to bat and attract those things that are very challenging. There are also some really cool business support groups that actually look at childcare as a business. And how do you start childcare? And the trick about childcare is there's tons of regulation, which we all understand why. And we all want that, right? But for you to start a childcare business, though they are very, very profitable, there are a lot of hurdles. So thinking about how you make the financial capital available to people to get past the hurdles and the regulation so that they can provide the things that you need as businesses, it's definitely something that requires a strong advocate and people who understand that process. But yeah, other things that you'd like to see groups in your community advocate for. It's interesting because in many ways, being in Denver, a really large place, can make advocacy harder than if you were in a really small community where you have straightforward access. I always have this joke that like small communities, everybody's wearing 20 hats. And so if you need something done, you go to one person, you can ask them 20 questions, they can solve all the problems. But, there's only one person and you run out of time pretty quickly in terms of what they can get done. In a larger city, everybody only gets a quarter of a hat. So nobody can actually answer any one question on their own, and it makes for a longer process to advocate. All right. And I think we've gotten into a little bit of the conversation about what you would like help with, but we left some time here, and I think we have just about 5 minutes to talk about any ideas that you have or other things that, if this sparked ideas for you, things that you'd like to see or things that you'd like to do. It sounds like a lot of you all are actually businesses that support other businesses and organizations that are working to make this world a better place. So we're all like-minded folks, and I'd love to hear if you have any ideas based on what we've talked about.
I mean, one of the things we're always working on, both as Outgrow Your Garage as a business, but then also in Delta and other rural communities, is really how do we bridge some of those, not just the technology gap, because we're starting to get internet in more places, but that process of filtering out information into the community in terms of if you are having, Delta is actually a really great example of that, where I just learned we have an urban renewal authority from you. Not from my county. And so really working on those outbound communication pieces into the broader community, particularly as people are coming out of urban areas and into more rural ones. Like, what are the ways that you've seen success in terms of integrating new members of communities and getting that information out into places as things like publicizing Zoom city council meetings becomes more common. But those meetings aren't necessarily recorded to watch later, or those types of informational pieces.
Yeah. I think that access and communication are one of those things that almost everybody needs more of, right? Across the board. And I will tell you, I know an enormous amount about all different communities in our state, but it's not the first time I've heard that, right? I'll be talking to somebody and they're like, I had no idea that was going on in my community, but that's my job. And so I get in there and kind of know about it. But yes, thinking about how to expand the messaging within a community. And a lot of times you'll hear people say, we're close knit and we do most stuff by word of mouth. And yeah, that's, it's nice in concept, but I don't think it always really connects. And so you have seen a lot of communities really start to rely on things like Nextdoor, where it's all based on zip code, or in terms of businesses, the idea of marketing through specific zip codes and putting in geographic boundaries on your messaging. But a lot of it, I think, needs to come from the communities. And it's hard because I don't think the public sector's strength has ever been communication and marketing, right? That's a private sector strength for sure. And so what I see that as is an opportunity that businesses could solve a problem for a community. Right? Like every time I come across a community and they're like, oh no, we're having this problem. We can't do anything more because we're already wearing 20 hats and we only have 40 hours in a week. I say, you know what? What you do is invite the community to solve your problem. Like all of those entrepreneurs out there have ideas and one of them might be able to solve this problem. So you just need to put that out there and tell them what the problem is and invite them to share. And so that really also goes to creating that culture and that ecosystem so that you do have true public-private partnerships. Cool. And then just with our last moment, I know we're going to get cut off right here, but I have this, we'll skip across this, but this is some of sort of the benefits of engagement for all different types of businesses. And I think we've mostly touched on all of this, but we did have one more slide. So for businesses kind of going beyond the typical donations or serving on events, I do hear from a lot of folks that like, you know, the events that happen in communities are not very helpful for businesses. And so serving on those boards and serving on those committees is one way to really make sure that they are useful for you and for businesses. Offering mentorships and apprenticeships is one way to really help community and help yourself, because you get to kind of train people on what you're doing and potentially find partners or new employees going forward. As I mentioned, submitting proposals to solve community challenges, investing in your place. So thinking about your immediate area, what is around you? What is your commercial area? What is that community? Even in Denver, as I mentioned, there's 16 different districts here, and there's a lot of these neighborhood residential organizations. And so all of them are place-based. They're all looking at a specific community and how to make it stronger. And so you can be a part of that, and you can submit ideas to how to fix it and, you know, maybe get a contract out of it. And then cross-promoting and making sure that you're in touch with who's around you, who are your neighbors, and thinking about all the time how what you do can add to what they do, and what they do can add to what you do, and you can have a partnership together. And that is all we have for today. So we want to thank you all so much for being here. If you have any questions, I know we're out of time, but you've been great in conversating with us. And we have a lot of different types of events and things happening. So we wanted to share those with you. We do have a statewide conference that is called In the Game, and Good Business Colorado always joins us there. We're going to be in Durango in April. And it's really a cool way to see how all of the different aspects of a community ecosystem work together. And we would love to invite all of you to join us.